Donovan from the Hudson Republican Committee, and joining me tonight is Corey Lewandowski from Americans for Prosperity here in New Hampshire. And Corey, welcome to Hudson, and thanks for joining us again. We had spoken, I guess it was about almost a year ago. You came down and we talked about some of the things that your group does. Can you give us an overview again of Americans for Prosperity nationally and locally?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back. Americans for Prosperity here in New Hampshire is based in Windham, which is where I live, just the next town over. We're really just an organization of activists who get together on issues that affect people's pocketbooks. So AmericansForProsperity.org is our website. There are a number of state chapters. I run the chapter here in New Hampshire, and I oversee the chapters in Maine and Connecticut and Ohio and New York. So we've got a big territory that we're focused on. And our job is either focused in the state capitals, where they're doing public policy, or looking down in Washington, D.C. to make sure that our elected officials down there are held accountable so that they don't continue to spend beyond their means, and that's really our focus.
Mm-hmm. Now, 2012 was the second year of the Republican control of both houses in the legislature. How would you compare the job that they did in 2012 versus 2011?
2011 up in Concord was really all about the budget, and it took a huge focus. And as you know, the Republicans pushed through a budget which reduced spending and reduced taxes. Things like the car registration fee was reduced. Mm-hmm. In real-time money in 2011, our state budget went down 11%, which is really 18% total spending. Our budget now is about just over $10 billion, and that's a testament to the work that was done up there. What we saw this year in 2012 was a little bit different. They tackled some constitutional amendments that some of the voters will have the opportunity to vote on in November, and they tackled big picture things like RGGI reform, renewable portfolio standards. They looked at some health care issues. The health care compact was one of those bills that they looked at. Mm-hmm. It was very, very different because the tenure of Concord had changed, and I think what we saw up there was the governor was no longer the lead. And really, the House Republicans, and specifically Bill O'Brien and his leadership, were the driving force of moving legislation through, and not just any legislation, but conservative principle legislation which said, we can do better with less. And I can tell you that the message in Concord is, if it's in the yellow pages, we don't need it in the state government.
Oh, that's excellent. How would you compare what the Republicans have been able to do over that 2011 and 2012 cycle versus 2009 and 2010 that the Democrats had actually total control of the governor's office in both houses?
Well, the voters will remember this, but in 2009 and 2010, there were 83 new taxes and fees put on the voters. Everything from interest and dividends tax to business and enterprise tax went up, business profit tax, the things where small businesses in our communities were trying to grow jobs. We were in the middle of a very difficult recession. And the notion was, let's tax a little more so we can make sure we don't grow any more jobs. That was the old way of doing business. The new way of doing business is, let's cut spending. Let's cut taxes. Let's let people have money in their own pocket. Let's not go back to that family of four in New Hampshire and ask them for another $3,600, which is what they would have had to pay if we would have continued on the trajectory of spending. So it's been a marked difference. The big difference also is what we've seen is the economy has gotten a little bit better. In real-term numbers, unemployment in New Hampshire has gone from 5.9% down to about 5%. Nationally, we're phenomenal. There's still a lot more work to do. But what we've done is we've cut state government employees. These are the employees that many times have been vested into the system, are getting a big pension plan at the end. We've reformed, and again, I don't vote on these things, but Concord has reformed pensions. They've cut the way we've done business as usual, so it's been a big difference. We've started down the right path, but there's a lot more work to do moving forward.
Now, your website, and I'll let you let us know what that is, it scores the legislation itself and also the reps and the senators. Looking at some of the legislation, what stands out in your mind as some of the achievements that you've had, or that you see that we've had in this 2011 and 2012 cycle, and what are some of the things that were a bit of a disappointment?
Well, at AmericansForProsperity.org, which is our website, you can go into the New Hampshire page. It's updated almost daily. There's a big, right at the very top of the page, it shows where our scorecard is. That scorecard delineates all 400 state representatives in a grade from A+ to F. It's just like being in school. If you F, as far as we're concerned, you failed, it's tough to get an A+. And we grade every year, so over a biannual session, we give you a total grade. And to tell you how tough it is, there are 19 Republicans in the state Senate. Over that 2-year period, one State Senator Jim Forsythe, received an A+. Everyone else received less than that. In order to get an A+, you had to both vote on every issue according to what our scorecard represented, and you had to be present. In other words, if you missed one vote or you missed 2 votes and you had an excuse, you couldn't get an A+. So it's tough to get an A+. It's tough to get an A+ in school, tough to get an A+ from us. You know, that scorecard is a very good metric. These aren't our opinions on things. This is the voting record of the elected officials. So what we do is we compile all this information from the General Court's website on a series of roll call votes. Everything from the Healthcare Compact, which I thought was a really good piece of legislation, to allowing individuals to buy insurance, health insurance, over state lines. And when the 2 bodies, respectively, take roll call votes, meaning they press the button and they say yes or no, we support this bill, we look at those bills which have an economic impact on the voters, and then we score them and we put those in our scorecard. So we were successful sometimes. We didn't get the Healthcare Compact done. We didn't get it so you could buy your health insurance across state lines. But we did change a program called RGGI. We killed a program called Liquid RGGI, which was something where the state wanted to spend money to go out and look at low-carbon fuel standards. We said no to that. The legislature said no, and we stopped that over the governor's veto in many cases. Right to work. That's a big issue in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. You know, right to work is this piece of legislation that has never really gotten its fair share, and the state Senate has been great on getting that bill done. We couldn't get it done in the House. There were 298 Republican members of the House, and we couldn't generate enough votes to support a free market policy like right to work over the governor's veto. So both in 2011 and 2012, the House failed to get that bill done, and that's something we put a lot of effort into, and I'm hoping we'll have another shot at it next year.
Mm-hmm. Now, here in Hudson, we've got 9 state reps, all of them Republican. All of them score very well as far as the scorecard is concerned. We're talking about mostly, half of them have A's and A+, there's 1 C. So all in all, our reps are doing really well. What's your take on the Hudson state reps? You
know, the reps in Hudson, like my town in Windham and the next town over Salem, they get it. You know, a lot of times people who move into our communities are transplants. And people say, geez, that southern border of Massachusetts must be liberal. Well, it's just the opposite. Because people, you know, they extract themselves from Massachusetts because they're tired of the taxes. They're tired of the fees. So they come here and they want smaller government. And the reps here in Hudson and in Windham have done a great job of holding the line on spending, voting for the right issues. And I can tell you, when I look around to Merrimack and Stratford and Belknap, there are a whole list of Republican representatives who receive Fs. They receive Fs in our scorecards. F is a fail. If you can't support our issues on 11 or 12 issues more than 50% of the time, you need to rethink really what you're doing. And here's our take on the whole scorecard. We want to give it to the voters. We want the voters to decide if their elected officials are doing the right thing. So you take our scorecard and you say, yes, I agree with your positions, Americans Prosperity Foundation, and I'm going to support those people at the ballot box who vote the right way. Or they may say, we don't agree with your position, Americans Prosperity Foundation, and everybody who you gave an F to, we're going to support those people. This is just another tool that the voters can use to decide, to understand better what their elected officials in Concord are doing. Because many times, people go to Concord and they'll say and do one thing, then they'll come back home and they'll say and do something different. So it's really important to give the voters the tools. And here in Hudson and Windham and Salem, you know, our representatives in general have done a very, very good job of supporting issues that we feel are most important from an economic perspective.
Sure. And if anybody that's watching this wants to get a copy of the scorecard, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can either go right to our website. It's available electronically. You can search it, americansprosperity.org. Go to the New Hampshire State page. You can see it's right at the very top, or you can contact us, 894-5881. I'll be happy to mail you a copy.
Okay, excellent, excellent. We talked about Speaker Bill O'Brien a little while ago, and if if you read the Nashua Telegraph, you'd think it's a toss-up between Bill O'Brien and Ahmadinejad as far as the most dangerous man in the world. You're up in Concord. You know Speaker O'Brien. You know, what's your take on him, and why does the other side target him so much?
You know, I can speak personally about him. I've gotten to know him very, very well. He's a man of conviction, a man of principles. They target him because he's effective. Because as we're going to look back in the next 10 years in our state, the people are going to look back at this historic legislature, which has overridden the governor in the last 2 years more times than all of the time combined that Governor Lynch has been overridden as the governor. and they're going to say, wow, this is truly transformational. We actually cut spending. Grandma didn't end up in the snowbank. Luckily, we had no snow last year. But really, they're going to say, the state still functioned, but I had more money in my pocket. I paid less for things. You know, we reduced the property tax bill in some places. We passed school choice. This is a big deal. School choice, education choice. The legislature up there, under the leadership of Bill O'Brien, was not afraid to push the envelope. Bill O'Brien has said time and again, he is not going to be in office for 10, 20, or 30 years. This isn't his goal, is to be taken out of Concord, you know, at the ripe old age of 97, and they say, boy, it was such a young age to go up there, because that's about the average age of some of these guys. The difference is Bill O'Brien has come in with his core convictions. He campaigned on what he wanted to accomplish, and he's held true to those promises. Now, people don't like that. People don't like when you push the envelope, and you know, when you look over at the state Senate, which is a very different body, they'll tell you, you're a freshman. Why don't you wait 3 or 4 terms to get your feet wet before you decide to raise an issue of importance? And I can tell you, a state senator like Jim Forsythe, who pushed through school funding, educational choice, they said to him, you'll never do this as a freshman. Wait till you're in your 3rd or 4th term. Wait till you've been here 6, 8, or 10 years. And they said, absolutely not. And that's the same mentality that Bill O'Brien has. He says, we've got a short window. We've made a promise to the voters. Let's cut spending. Let's cut taxes. Let's return money to you. And look, it's going to be tough. You got to stick with me. And he wasn't successful every time, but on the majority of the things he's been able to get through, it's been a great relief to the taxpayers.
Well, I mean, we just don't have the time. If you look at the fact that we were running deficits, you also look at the fact that on our pension shortfall is in the neighborhood of $4.7 billion. We just don't have the luxury of time on a lot of these things. So I think they're doing a great job as far as getting the ball moving in the right direction. Hopefully we can do it. And that's why the election coming up obviously is critical, not only on the national level, but here for our state reps. And so I think that I agree with you. I think Speaker O'Brien has done a fantastic job. A few questions. Previously we had talked about right to work, and I know as far as Americans for Prosperity, the national group, right to work is a key issue. Recently, you held an event in Washington, D.C. that Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin attended, and you told me he did a phenomenal job as far as speaking to that group. What's your take on his recall election in June, the results of that, and what does really a right to work have to do with us here in New Hampshire?
Well, I can tell you, Americans for Prosperity every year puts on this event called Defending the American Dream. And if you don't leave there and feel better about yourself as a patriot and an American, then you have no blood. Just one quick story. I was down there, and we had a bunch of people from New Hampshire who came down. And in the last day of the session, there was a gentleman in a wheelchair who had a World War II hat on. And our president got up and he said, I want to recognize someone here today who not only was a World War II vet, but he was there on the beach in Normandy on D-Day. And this gentleman, clearly in his 80s, sat there in the wheelchair, and there were 2,000 people in this room. And he struggled, and he got up out of his wheelchair under his own accord, and he reached into his pocket, and he pulled out the American flag, and he waved it in front of 2,000 people. If that doesn't make your eyes water, it just tells you how proud you are to be an American. But you get the same feeling listening to Scott Walker, who was down there, who the unions came after Scott Walker in Wisconsin, and they said, this guy is the devil. He's going to destroy our state. And he was duly elected as the governor, and they filed a recall petition. They spent millions of dollars to come out and get Scott Walker out of office. And on the recall day, Scott Walker was vindicated. He won again. And the reason was, just like Chris Christie in New Jersey, when you stand up and you say controversial things like Bill O'Brien, Chris Christie, Scott Walker, people take notice, and they don't like it. They want it to be the old way it used to be. Hey, we're all going to go along to get along. You're going to wait your turn. You'll have your share in the future. That's not what these gentlemen do. And so when it comes to issues like right to work, the unions have been very aggressive. And here's what right to work really means. Right to work means an employee has the choice whether or not to join a union. They're no longer forced to do so. And Indiana, governed by Mitch Daniels, who was a cabinet member in the last administration, he pushed this through at the last minute in Indiana with a Republican legislature. Since he's pushed that bill through, 1 in 4 jobs in our country have been created in Indiana. 25% of all jobs created have been done so in Indiana since that state has become a right-to-work state. Now, if that doesn't tell you that we're open for business as a state, if New Hampshire were to become a right-to-work state, what that means is big manufacturing plants, whether it's Boeing or Caterpillar or others, that want to come to a state that has a skilled labor force like we do, that has a smart, educated workforce like we do, that has no property taxes, no income taxes, that is a great place to do business. We open that door and say we're a right-to-work state. We will be the only right-to-work state in the Northeast, the only one east of Indiana, the only one north of probably Virginia, right? That says we are open for business, and that allows us to go to these big manufacturers and say, come put your plant here. We have the resources, we have the infrastructure, and we have the people to be successful. And that's really what it's about, is giving people the choice when they go to the private sector if they want to join a union or not. And if you look at some of the successful unions, the Airline Pilots Association, they say, hey, you don't have to be a member of our union, but if you're not going to be a member of our union, we're not going to bargain for you. We're not going to collect dues for you. You've got to go out and do it on your own. And I think that's the right thing. I think when it comes to unions, if you don't want to pay your dues, you shouldn't ask for the benefits that they bring to their employees. And the same is true on the converse. You know, if you want to be part of that union, by all means, you should be able to file your grievances with the union. You should get every benefit that they provide you, but you shouldn't be forced to do it. And the last time I checked, it's still America. You still have some choices in our country, not as many as you used to, but we're working to get some of those back.
Do you think there's a connection between right to work and pension reform?
Oh, sure. I mean, this past legislature, the 2011-2012 legislature, passed a pension reform, specifically on state employees. And what it said was you couldn't do the spiking anymore. So it used to be that every your highest 3 years, that would be your pension based on those 3 years. So the legislature said, we can't do that anymore. We're literally going broke, the state is. We need to move to, in my opinion, a defined contribution plan. No longer a defined benefit plan. You know, the days of pensions have gone by the wayside. I mean, those are the days my grandfather was a union printer for 45 years at the same shop in Lowell, Massachusetts, where he knew he was going to get his pension. Those days are gone now. So if you want a pension and you want pension reform, you've got to basically say to employees, look, you have to have a vested interest in the outcome. State employees, municipal employees, you can't just live off the taxpayers for 20 years, increase your salary for the last 3, and decide that that's what I'm going to make in perpetuity. So I can't get out at 45 years old anymore. We've raised that retirement age to 50 in your last 5 years. And I think what you're going to find is people want to abuse the system. And I'm not knocking the people who did it, because that's what the system was. And they had a right to follow the rules. But the rules have changed. And this notion now, and you hear this a lot, particularly from the union firefighters who come in and say, you made us a promise. You made us a promise when we signed up to be a firefighter that this is where we'd be. That promise was made when you're 21 years old. You're now 56, right? Times have changed. And if we don't continue to change with the system, then there won't be a system for the younger guy. And don't you want the upcoming firefighters to have those same benefits you had? The health care and and taking an interest? It's not just any one union, but it's really the public sector unions that don't want to see right to work passed in New Hampshire.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've been talking about mostly New Hampshire state issues, and obviously you're the director of the Americans for Prosperity here in New Hampshire. But what's your take on the national election?
Boy, I think it's a clear dichotomy, and I don't think anybody would say otherwise. If you've got Mitt Romney and Barack Obama in the room, a lot of times you've been through a lot of elections. People say it's the lesser of two evils. I really don't like either candidate. They're so much the same. They're both vanilla. I'm just going to pick one because I like him better than I like the other one. That's not the case in this election at the national level. At the national level, we've got two very clear choices. We can go down the same path that we've been on for the last 4 years, increasing debt, increasing our obligations to other countries, or we can change. We can say, you know what, the government is too big, it's too bloated, it's time to reform it, it's time to stop growing the government, it's time to decide that local level is better than national control, it's time to put the residents first, and not thinking, hey, the bureaucrats know what's best. I don't want to deal with a bureaucrat when it comes to my health care. I don't want to have to call some nameless, faceless person in Washington. I want to pick up the phone and I want to talk to someone in Concord, New Hampshire, or in Windham, or in Hudson, that's going to be able to direct where I'm going. So I think this election is very clear. You've got Barack Obama and Joe Biden on one side who say, look, you've given us 4 years, the economy still isn't better, unemployment is still high nationally, but you know what, we need 4 more years to spend more money. And every bailout that we have provided has been a disaster, and our national debt now is more than all the other countries combined. Or we've got someone on the other side who says, I've got practical business experience, and a vice president who has made it his mission in Congress to cut spending, to reform our benefits program. Look, I think we need to give someone a new shot. That's my opinion. It's not Americans' Prosperity's opinion. It's my opinion that things haven't gone the way that we've wanted. And, you know, to quote George Stephanopoulos and James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. You know, are you and your family better off today than they were 4 years ago? And we are very, very fortunate in New Hampshire. Don't get me wrong. But as you have heard probably from some of the gubernatorial candidates, we are the second most commuted out of state in the country. Everybody lives in New Hampshire, commutes to Massachusetts for their job. Second most state in the country. We need to do something to keep those people back here in New Hampshire creating good, high-paying jobs. And I don't think if we continue to increase our national debt and spend beyond our means and bail out for-profit companies, it's sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, you know, Barack Obama just recently made a statement that in his mind, the private sector is doing fine. It's the public sector that's not growing fast enough, which obviously is, you know, tends to vote very, very democratically. Regardless of the outcome of the November election, what's some of the legislation that you're looking at right now for the next cycle, or what are some of the topics that you're going to really want to keep on top of next year?
I think in Concord, what we want to do is we want to go out and advocate for a smaller budget once again. This is a novel idea, right? Let's spend less than what we spent the year before. There is still money to be cut out there. We should cut the border tax and land appeal. It's a bloated $1.15 million agency that has 12 employees, 12 state employees. Let's privatize the liquor stores. Let's get a private business to come in and run these things, and let's extract these employees who are state employees who are getting the pension at the end. I think, again, if it's in the phone book, as what they say in Concord, it shouldn't be in the state government. Let's get rid of the plows, right? Why do we need state plows? We have to maintain them. We've got to plow the roads. We've got to fix them. We've got to pay the people. Let's contract this out, right? We don't have to pay the contractor. The contractor's truck breaks. Guess what? Contractor has to fix it. So let's do some of these things. Let's continue to privatize things at the state level to make the state more efficient, more effective. I think we've got to pass right to work. It's a priority of ours. Americans' Prosperity is fully vested in doing that. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, a cap-and-trade program here on New Hampshire residents every time they get their electric bill. The system has been reformed a bit. Let's get us out of this failed program. The state which they claimed was the biggest polluter in this program was New Jersey. And they extracted themselves from the program. And so if this was such a great windfall for all these states, why would New Jersey get out? Because they don't have any budget deficits down there, budget surpluses. They would take this money and spend it. But what's happened is they realized the carbon market is a joke. What you decide the carbon market is and what I decide it is are two completely different things. If you say it's worth $1, I say it's worth 1,000. Let's compromise. You give me $500. That's what it is. We're selling smoke and air. That's literally what we're smelling. Selling this should be illegal. And the market has completely fallen through the floor. So let's get out of Reggie. Let's pass right to work. Let's pass a smaller state budget once again, and let's start privatizing some of these things like the Liquor Commission. And you know what? Let's sell these giant entities, these giant liquor stores on the highways. Let's put a McDonald's next to them, or Burger King, or a private sector. You couldn't get enough cars into those parking lots if this was a private business, the liquor store. They would have a Wendy's next to that thing, or a Burger King or a McDonald's at every rest stop. And every mom and dad who doesn't care about the liquor store would be in at that McDonald's or Burger King picking kids' food up and driving up and down the highway. Now, I went to York, Maine yesterday. I brought the kids up to the zoo up there, right? I drive right past the New Hampshire liquor store on the highway. You can't stop and get something to eat there. It's just, let's get into the 21st century, could you?
Good point.
Let's do that.
Right. Now, on the governor's side, obviously Governor Lynch, we know, is stepping down. On the Republican side, we've got two, in my opinion, awesome candidates, Kevin Smith and Ovid LaMontagne. On the Democrat side, I'm not all that familiar with Jackie Seeley and Maggie Hassan. What's your take on those four candidates as far as, they haven't really been in the state House recently, I don't think all four of them. But as far as your viewpoint, American for Prosperity, what's your take on those four, and what do you think, how would they do in the
Here's what I think. I think, again, like at the federal level, you've got a clear distinction in the candidates. You've got Kevin Smith and Ovid LaMontagne, who have signed our American for Prosperity pledge. which is available on our website, americansprosperity.org. It says, no new taxes, no new fees, support right to work, uphold the New Hampshire Constitution, uphold the U.S. Constitution. That's a pretty basic pledge. And I think most of the listeners would say, geez, that makes a whole bunch of sense to me. Maggie Hassan and Jackie Sealy have said, we can't sign pledges. We just don't believe in pledges. And what that means to me is one of those issues they don't agree with. So either they're not in favor of right to work, they're not in favor of supporting our Constitution, or they're not in favor of cutting taxes and fees. And at a time where, again, the average person is struggling, we need to make sure the state is tightening their belt just like every homeowner has to do. So I think regardless of who comes through the Republican primary, Kevin Smith or Over LaMontagne, their philosophy at its core is very different than the philosophy of Jackie Sealy and Maggie Hassan. Maggie Hassan, as you may know, and your listeners, your viewers may know, lives at Phillips Exeter, one of the most prestigious high schools in the country. She lives in subsidized housing. She doesn't understand what it's like to make a mortgage payment. She doesn't understand what it's like to pay her electric bill because her husband runs the institution, so she lives there. So it's very difficult to understand what it's like when you get an electric bill in or your phone bill in or whatever it may be because you don't have these things. Jackie Sealy is a little different. And what we're even seeing amongst the Democrats is a clear break. Jackie Sealy is the union-supported individual, probably has the most number of union endorsements in that race. Maggie Hassan has the money people, the in people, the crowd, if you will. And they're both trying to position themselves as the next John Lynch. Well, here's the difference. John Lynch is a nice guy, but he's not a leader. And it's time we put a leader in the corner office. And what that means is you lead from the top. When it comes to budgeting, you lead from the top. And that's not what John Lynch has done. When it comes to tough issues, John Lynch has said, you know what, that's a tough issue. I'm going to let that one become law without my signature. Well, that's a really tough issue. I'm not sure what I should do on this one. Let's give it a little time. And that's the problem. In our state, our residents, they deserve a leader in the corner office. Whether you agree or disagree with them, we need a leader. And right now, I don't think either of those former state senators, both failed candidates, have the ability to lead our state to where we need to go in the future.
Well, Corey, I want to say, thanks a lot for coming down. We really appreciate your viewpoint on everything. Keep up the great work up in Concord, again, thanks for coming down. Before we sign off, I just want to thank all the folks at Hudson Cable that really help us out. Tonight we have Rick Lavasser, Scott Pearson, and Chris Giorgio, and as always, Michael Keefe and Jim McIntosh do a lot of help or provide a lot of help for us. So we thank everyone that's involved, and thank you for your time.